This video will contain spoilers for Assassin's Creed Shadows. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Yes, I have finally finished the main story of Assassin's Creed Shadows after 29 hours of playtime, a very enjoyable 29 hours of playtime. I finally finished the story and of course, I have my thoughts. While I will be doing scripted videos later down the line that go more in depth on particular scenes or storylines in the game, this is my initial unscripted ramblings of what I thought about the story, the positives, the negatives, and just to give you a basic impression on how I'm feeling now that I've reached the credits of the game. So I think the best place to start is to talk about my experience with the game. So what was it like for me playing through Assassin's Creed Shadows? And honestly, it was very enjoyable, which I'm very happy to say. So I have not had a pleasant experience with the previous Assassin's Creed games, specifically from Odyssey onwards. I mean, Assassin's Creed Odyssey still lives in my head rent-free. I can still hear that level up music because it's ingrained into me. It was such an unpleasant experience to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I found it such a grind, just a checklist of objectives, and oh my goodness me. I could not tell you a single thing that happens in Odyssey's story. That's how much I was engaged in it. I could not tell you a single thing, and I played 85 hours of Odyssey, including the DLC. I don't know what was going on in that. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a more pleasant experience. I really enjoyed the first 5 hours of the game and the last 2 hours of the game. Everything in between was so long and boring. I was not a fan, okay? So just to give you that context, I was not a fan of the previous RPG games. Assassin's Creed Mirage, I put it down after like 2 hours. I started it and I just stopped playing it. And then I came back like 3 months later and finished it. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I put that down, came back 6 months later and finished it. These are just not games that have engaged me, unfortunately. And this is someone who, I'm a massive fan of Assassin's Creed. I used to get these games at Christmas and I would rattle through them within the first week. I would get the games done, start to finish, probably from the first game up until Syndicate. They were just so engaging. Even Origins. I used to play Origins so much. So I can't even say that it's the RPG format that I don't like. I think it is just the structure of those later games, because Assassin's Creed Origins really did engage me and I found it to be the perfect blend between a sort of fantasy roleplay game and an Assassin's Creed game. It still had that at its core. So going into Shadows, I was very worried because it is the team that made Odyssey, and I'm so happy to say that I did not feel anywhere near the grind of Odyssey or Valhalla. I played this game relatively anger-free. It was a very pleasant experience. I cruised through the story at my own pace. There was only one point in the game where I did actually need to grind because I was underleveled, and that's when I got to the Fox. This is the third to last Shinbakufu target in the game, and I was like level 28, I think, and I didn't realize that his boss fight is like level 40, which is really weird because there's no, it scales down after that. So that boss fight, I got one shot so many times and it was really annoying me, but I did find a very quick way of getting around this. So in the game, your objective board will have a lot of targets on that board, and if you complete an entire circle, you will get about 5,000 XP, and that's going to boost you up nearly an entire level. So all I did was go through, I think, the Pirates circle and maybe another one, and I managed to get up to a decent level within an hour, and then I took on the Fox, and I was at the perfect level for the rest of the game. So that was the only occasion where I felt I needed to stop what I was doing and grind. But apart from that, an incredibly easy experience. You will play this game from start to finish, and you've got the separate quest lines for Norway and Yasuke that help you guide through it. And yeah, if you're not trying to shotgun the main story, if you engage with the hideout has this fantastic building that gives you an extra 10% XP, so I highly recommend getting that as soon as possible because that will make the experience easier. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was meant to be in the shop at some point. So aside from anything in the actual game, my experience of playing it was very nice, and I think that has swayed my opinion on things like the story, because admittedly, the story in Assassin's Creed Shadows is a bit weird, it's a bit odd, it's a bit different from what we've had in the previous entries, and I'm still rattling my head around whether I like the direction it went in or not, because there's certainly some moments that I don't like, and the structure of the game in general I think is a bit odd. Let's get into this. Okay, so I think the structure of the game is really weird. You start with Yasuke being introduced to Oda Nobunaga, and then we quickly flash forward to the attack on Naoya's village, and this is the center of where this whole story revolves around, is the attack on this village. The game will do a lot of prelude leading up to that event, and it will also do a lot after that event. So you're basically getting a game of two halves revolving around this event that happens at the start of the game. And for me, I think, honestly, I would have preferred if this story was told chronologically, because everything leading up to that event is really good. I was a massive fan of the separate storylines with Yasuke and Naoya. Every time I got an indicator that there was going to be another flashback mission, I got really excited, because those are the best in the game. In a way, they reminded me a lot of the classic Assassin's Creed missions, the linear storytelling in a contained area, there's no massive open world. They were perfectly structured in my opinion. The dialogue was incredibly superior to what is happening in the present storyline in the game. Everything that takes place after that village attack feels like it's kind of meandering or just trying to kill time to get to the resolution of the flashbacks, whereas the flashbacks feel like they are a naturally progressing story that go from one beat to another very quickly, and you're getting to learn more about the characters more in depth, and they're treated like actual characters. Whereas I think what happens is, when Yasuke is introduced into the story, it starts to slow down massively. And the story arcs they're engaging. I must admit, I did skip quite a lot of the cutscenes. It started to become a bit of a B simulator, because I was just mashing B trying to get through some of these cutscenes. I'm reading the dialogue as we go, but the performances weren't exactly engaging, and I didn't feel like the storylines were particularly engaging for a lot of the later arcs. But unlike Valhalla, there's not like 15 arcs. There's like, aside from major story beats, there's maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or something like that. So it's about a third of that cut down, which makes them a lot easier to engage with and actually play, because you can see on the board how much of the game you've got left, whereas in Valhalla you had to just keep going. You had to just go into the endless void, never knowing when it was going to end. And I think the reason I didn't hate the arcs so much is because they seem like leftovers from the RPG games. They seem like the last sort of stretch that this system, this sort of objective board system, is going to get. It reminded me a lot of Mirage, which is scary because I didn't think anything from Mirage would carry over into this game, but it seems to have followed the same structure where it kind of outlines everything you're going to do at the beginning, and you just have to go through it. You just have to checklist it off, which is their way of structuring the game into sequences without actually calling them sequences. It's just, this target is the next arc, and you'll go through that arc, which made sense to me. The presentation of it is a bit weird. I would have preferred linear sequences to explain what was going on a bit more, but that's purely a sort of presentation level thing. That's not massively affecting the game. But yeah, as I was saying about these flashbacks, they are the best part of the game. Yasuke's storyline in this game is really good, okay? From start to finish, I am a big fan of where his character started, kind of what happened in the middle, but the ending is also really solid, and that feels like kind of what the game should have been more focused on. I feel like a lot of Yasuke's screen time is cut down depending on whether you choose to play as him or not. Now that I've finished the game, I can kind of see what they were going for in terms of the structure of the game, where Yasuke is following the Templar storyline and Naoya is following the Assassin storyline, and they're slowly both uncovering who these different factions are. And for fans of the series, that's going to sound like a really good thing. However, I do feel in the execution it's a little bit lacking, and it all sort of gets pushed into the last few hours of the game. There's a lot of time in this game, and I mean a good 2/3 of it, where you're not playing as Assassins or Templars, and there's no idea of like how this fits into the lore of the series. However, when you do get to that part where they start to explain stuff, well, you're going to raise some eyebrows. On paper, we have Naoya's storyline of her village getting burned down and she's trying to find out why. What was the context behind all of this happening? And we get a linear sort of first 10 hours of the game where you're playing just as Naoya leading up to her attack on Oda Nobunaga. And this was a really engaging start to the story. It felt like each target was naturally leading from one to the other. And I must say, some of the targets in this sequence were actually memorable, if you can believe it. A lot of the targets later in the game barely get any dialogue, but especially the first target, the lady who shot Naoya, I thought that whole sequence where Naoya has to learn Japanese sort of customs of like the upper class, infiltrates the party, finds out who the woman was and then goes to confront her. Fantastic, perfect structure, felt like an old AC game to me. I loved that, I loved it. The only thing I didn't like was obviously the lack of confession scenes, but she actually did manage to have some dialogue before she died, so in a sense I think it did make up for it. And this all leads up to Naoya confronting Nobunaga, which is possibly, in my opinion, one of the best scenes in the entire game. I remember when I was watching that cutscene thinking, this is great, you know, this feels like the game is picked up, it's got some steam going to it. When Nobunaga game ends himself, I felt like the game took a bit of a twist, and I was sort of expecting it to really ramp up here, because Naoya finds out that she's sort of been betrayed in a way. And this is the moment when Yasuke is properly introduced into the story. It's kind of weird. Yasuke is introduced literally at the very beginning of the game. He is the first cutscene of him arriving in Japan with the Portuguese, and then it's sort of like forgotten about. Yasuke is missing for a good 10 hours of the story, and then he's slowly reintroduced from Naoya's perspective as like a villainous character, and then Yasuke has to win over Naoya. This is a very contentious scene. I don't feel like the execution was done very well. I feel like Yasuke's turn to the good side was sort of very rushed, and it didn't feel like it had like solid motivation, or at least I liked Yasuke's reason for turning to join Naoya, because Nobunaga was no longer there and the person that had overthrown him was like the bad guy. I like that, you know, makes sense, perfectly straightforward. He's only teaming up with Naoya because they share a common goal. I liked that. What I didn't like was then Junjiro, the little kid, coming in afterwards and trying to justify again, like give a second reason for why Naoya should trust him, because Naoya was like just as bad as Yasuke was. They're both like killing people on both sides. She killed Junjiro's dad, I think, without realizing, and I just watched that scene thinking like it's not necessary. We don't need this. I mean, it's quite good for Junjiro's character. It was a nice subversion on just the little kid trope that looks up to the assassin. We've had that with like Assassin's Creed Unity, for example. But this was different. This felt like it was just a plot device to get Yasuke onto the good side and to be forgiven within one cutscene. It's like the director or whatever gave the writers one scene to get Yasuke onto the good side, and that's all he got. He didn't get a gradual turn to the light side. And for example, a mission that I did afterwards was Yasuke and Naoya going to watch this sumo wrestling match, which was, I know that sounds really strange out of context, but it really was like straight afterwards. And they're having a laugh. And I feel like that was just a bit too quick of a turn, considering the amount of build-up that Yasuke was like a bad guy, just to quickly switch to him being a good guy. Just felt a little bit rushed, and I wasn't a massive fan of it. But I must say, even though I was playing as Yasuke for half of the game and Naoya for the other half, I didn't feel like Yasuke was getting anything in terms of a progressive storyline. Every time you would go into a cutscene, he would just be there. He would just be standing behind Naoya, while Naoya would ask the target, oh, where is the box? Blah, blah, blah. You know, she's after this box, which everybody who's played this game knows this stupid thing about the box. Every single target. There's no confession scenes in this game. There is a memory corridor, which is nice, but they never friggin' use it for any confession scenes. A lot of the times you will kill your target and they will just go blah 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 blah, you silly Billy, and Naoya will go, where is the box that you took from my father? And they'll just go, eh. And it's really stupid, and they must have known how much they were overusing this box thing It's such a silly plot device. Like, could Naoya not just be looking for revenge? Why is she looking for... I don't know. Anyway, and this is why I wanted to wait until the whole game was finished in order to talk about this, because at face value, it looks like the Shinbakufu are your traditional Assassin's Creed targets. They are the main 12 targets in the middle of the board that you've got to take out. However, the game pulls a bit of a subversion at the end, and it sort of reveals that these 12 targets are all just pawns for the actual Templars, and the Templar Order have been working in the background to manipulate and influence events to get these fellas to do what they wanted. However, the funny thing about this is, it is a good twist, in my opinion. It's in character for the Templars, and I did like that. The Templars in this game, I think, are brilliant. Well, they're not brilliantly written, but in terms of just getting the core traits of the Templars down, they got that. Brilliant. They did a good job. The problem is, it makes the Shinbakufu totally pointless. Like, they are literally just pawns to get to the main villains of the game. And for that to be stretched out over 13 targets, which are literally just one target to the next, just trying to find out where this box is, and they're all sort of generically the same. A lot of these targets are just sort of along the same lines. There's no interesting twists on like what their plans are, to the point where a lot of them die without ever saying what their motivation was. Those targets seem very similar to the ones in Valhalla, where the arcs are sort of self-contained and they don't lead on to the next one, and for the most part you're just doing busy work, whereas the difference between Shadows and Valhalla is that Shadows at least has the through line that Naoya is killing these people for a reason. She's trying to get information out of them to get closer to this box, whereas in Valhalla, there's like no reason, except you want to build your settlement. So it's sort of like there's not really much going on in terms of one plot line leading on to another. With Shadows, I felt like they did a much better job, and especially towards the end, when the Shinbakufu are finally out of the picture, the game just picks up entirely and goes, right, here's what was actually going on, and we're now going to spend the last couple of the hours of the game actually telling the story that we wanted to tell. And I don't know if they ran out of time, but Naoya's storyline just sort of ends. You get this massive dump at the end where it turns out that Hattori Hanzo betrayed the Brotherhood, and we're going to do a whole separate video on Mr. Hanzo because I did not feel very satisfied with his presence in this game, especially considering how it overwrites existing AC lore, and they just did a bit of a poor job with him. So he was in love with Naoya's mother, and he betrayed the Brotherhood because he couldn't get her, and God, it's just a weak motivation. But he wants to make things right. He wants to find Naoya's mother, and so the quest now becomes Naoya and Hanzo Hattori. So now Naoya and Hattori Hanzo are going to team up to find Naoya's mother. That's how the game ends. And genuinely, like, it feels like this kind of comes out of nowhere. There's also this flashback beforehand where Naoya's dad told her all of this. Like, after the village burned down, Naoya's dad told her everything about what was going on, what was in the boxes, where her mother was, like who her mother was, the assassins, everything. And Naoya just forgot. And it's only when she interacts with a rock that she gets these memories back. Just because she sits there and goes, I would like to remember now what I forgot. And then she remembers. And it's really weird. And then she goes into these assassin tombs, and I'll be honest, look, the stuff with the assassins got me. I did really like it. She goes into these assassin tombs, she learns the tenets of the creed. I don't know if she actually agreed with those tenets, but she now knows what they are, so that's quite good. I feel like it should have come maybe a bit more naturally in the story instead of just going, hey, these are the assassin tenets, you're now going to believe them. And she does get some cool robes at the end. That was nice. That felt like that was proper Assassin's Creed tomb sort of esque, where she gets the nice set of actual assassin robes at the end. I liked that. I thought that was nice. But then you've got like Hattori Hanzo coming in, and he has a boss fight, and then he's like, we're going to go and find your mother because she has the third box, and we have to put these 3 boxes on a pedestal. Cool. That's her storyline? Okay. It's also not concluded. The game just cuts to credits immediately after this, depending on which ending you choose to go with, whether you do Naoya's first or Yasuke's. And look, I know that all of this is going to get resolved in the close of Awaji DLC. This is entirely set up for the DLC, and can you imagine if, well, for people who haven't pre-ordered the game, you will have to pay for it. You will have to pay for this DLC. Luckily, I've pre-ordered, so I get it for free, but imagine if the people who have to pay for this, you've been given like 2/3 of a game. The actual epilogue of the game is going to be in this DLC where you find Naoya's mother, and it just felt like, especially for Naoya's storyline, they had to drag it out so far and then quickly just do a setup for a DLC. It didn't feel like Naoya's character had a full arc. I'm gonna say she could probably have not been in the game, which is kind of weird because on a story front, there's just not much going on there. It's a very straightforward motivation. It's pretty reminiscent of other Assassin's Creed like protagonists, except it's not executed as well as like a Connor or an Arno. Can't believe I'm saying that Arno was better executed, but I genuinely think he was. Now he is just a bit of a vapid character, which is so weird because in terms of gameplay, I'm not going to be talking too much about gameplay because I enjoyed it. I thought the gameplay loop was great. I liked the combat and the stealth. Parkour kind of sucked. But in terms of gameplay, Naoya is by far the superior character. She has eagle vision. She can climb. There were some points in this game where I really wanted to play as Yasuke, so I'd go around the open world, and then as soon as I got to a high building or like a sync point, I couldn't get to it. So I was like, well, why am I playing as this character that can't do anything in the open world? The only thing he can do is move boxes. These like large boxes. And I'm like, what? I don't get this decision to make Yasuke like lesser in the open world. I don't get it, because now that I've finished the story, I'm going to be going around and doing side quests, and if I play as Yasuke, I'm probably going to like not be able to reach half of them. So it's weird to me that Naoya is like the weaker character, and especially the performance is kind of lacking at times. I know I took the piss out of this a bit on the Odyssey last week, but I genuinely did not like the performance. I don't know what the actress was going for. There are some cutscenes, like especially that prologue, where I think she sounds great, and then the drop-off in quality is massive just in the delivery aspect. I don't know if she had to say her lines like one at a time or something, or if she was even in the room for some of it. But yeah, very strange delivery of some of these lines, and that's not just like because of her broken English, and I thought that's what it was. I thought they were trying to make Naoya sound like she had more broken English, but I genuinely just don't think it was a good performance. Not that her character is given much anyway, but especially compared to Yasuke, it stands out so much, and it's weird because, like I say, you've got Yasuke as the good character, and Naoya has the good gameplay. But they're separate. If this was one unified storyline, then it would work so much better, and I feel like if Yasuke was just made an assassin, if they just made Yasuke an assassin, didn't make him some massive 6-foot towering giant or whatever, and just made him a normal looking guy who became an assassin, you've got your game there. You've got your game. Yes, people would be absolutely fuming that they didn't get an Asian lead, but that would have been so much better for the storyline. I genuinely believe they should have melded both of these characters into one, because Yasuke has the much superior storyline, and now we'll get into that, because I felt like Yasuke just has so much more going on. His arrival in Japan, everything before that on the boat, the stuff with the Templars, the fact that throughout the story we're given hints that he knows who the assassins are. He's seen the blade before. And it's only at the end that we get the payoff to that, and we find out it's because an assassin saved him from the ship against the Templars, and that allowed him to escape and leads on to his story. We get a full anime training arc where Yasuke has to learn to be a samurai, and I'm glad they took the time and the care to deliver that story properly. You know, they address his race constantly throughout the story, and it's done really respectfully, I feel like. People, obviously, there are grifter YouTube channels that really hate Yasuke, but when you look at what's on the page and the performance and the presentation, I think Yasuke as a character was really well done. I thought that the Templars were also very well utilised in this game. Duarte, Nuno Caro, these are some really interesting characters. I like the little twist with the Silver Queen as well, that just, at the end of the game, it just becomes an Assassin's Creed game. Yasuke just goes on a full Templar-like arc, and it's brilliant. It's great. It feels like the characters are sort of progressing, and Yasuke's getting closure on his past, getting revenge on the men that killed his mother, and it's a very well executed storyline in my opinion. What I will say, unfortunately, is that the Templars are a little bit cartoonishly depicted. Yes, they're in character. It's when Nuno Caro shows up, you feel like, okay, this is it. This is the big bad. This is our Charles Lee, you know. This is our character that we can learn to hate. And he never really lives up to that. And I don't think it's because of limited screen time either. He does get a fair amount of screen time once he's been introduced. The problem is, when you listen to what he's saying, the dialogue is just not there. The writing is not up to standard with what I would have expected from like a Templar character. And I know that the potential was there, because after you kill Nuno Caro, you're given a rift. Now these rifts have been throughout Shadows, they've appeared a couple of times, and they're basically to catch you up on the lore. There's like one about a Spanish assassin that ended up founding the Japanese Brotherhood, which is quite a nice inclusion. I kind of wish it was a character that we knew and not just some random Spanish assassin. Like, why couldn't they have gone back 50 years or something and made it Aguilar, you know, from the movie? Why not tie that in a little bit, you know, just kind of, because he was in that time frame. I don't know, that could have maybe connected it a bit more, instead of just making this random new character and then having to catch us up on who he is and his motivation. I mean, it's some of the best writing in the game, which is really weird, because him breaking all three tenets of the creed and being exiled, what a fantastic idea. But we never see it, we just get told it through this weird like presentation cutscene thing. And then we get to Nuno Caro, so after he dies, there's this rift where he explains the Templar plan start to finish. And it's great. It's much stronger writing, where Duarte is like saying, oh, are we doing this for the power? Are we doing this for the money? Like, oh, are we going to get lots of wealth from this? And Nuno is like, bro, you've got such a narrow mindset. You need to expand and think about the larger sort of stakes here. Because obviously the Borgia were defeated by Ezio, so the Templars are kind of like, they're on the run at this point. They're looking for a way to expand, and the Order has tasked Nuno to go and take over Japan, and he wants to prove himself to the Templars because he is lesser in their ranks. He's sort of just one of the underlings that's been shoved over here to try and do something big. So he sees this as his opportunity to really make an impact, and that's what's led to this messy sort of structure with the Shinbakufu and all of that. And I thought that was a really interesting character motivation there. There was something there that could have really been expanded on. The problem is the credits play about 2 minutes later. Nuno's actual interactions with Yasuke are a little bit like cartoonish, you know, he's sort of like, Yasuke, I don't even know who you are, I'm going to kill you. And it's like, oh, come on, you could have done a little bit better than that. The stuff with the Silver Queen was good though, how she's Mitsuhide's daughter, and she doesn't want to avenge her father. She wants to actually like get revenge on the Templars. So she's trying to double cross them, and she uses Yasuke to do that. I thought that was really nice, because I thought that poison scene where Yasuke's poisoned was going to end up being a bit crap and a bit cringy, but then it actually ends up being quite good, so I did think that was quite nice. And his storyline weirdly like ends as soon as he kills Nuno, and I've got a really bad feeling that in the claws of Awaji there's nothing really for Yasuke to do. He says he's going to go to war with the Templars. That's cool. I thought that was a pretty decent like end scene to end on. It's like, okay, we're gonna get going now. This is it. He's going to launch a war against the Templars. But I still feel like there's a lot more to Yasuke's story. He will no doubt join the Assassins at some point because of their allegiances. He's never expressed any distaste towards the Assassins, so I wonder if that's maybe a potential future storyline that could be explored in the DLC. My worries are that the DLC is going to focus too much on Naoya, and it's going to be concluding Naoya's storyline, whereas it really should be continuing Yasuke's, which is like, if they do a DLC that just focuses on Naoya, that's perfectly fine. What I would love though is if they then brought out a second DLC, this second expansion, which was going to happen back when this game had a season pass before it was delayed. I don't know if that's still the case now, but I would love if we got a second DLC which just focuses on Yasuke, proper, traditional Templar storyline, like trying to take out the Templars. Maybe he goes to Portugal, or he goes to Spain and he tries to take back the land. That would be fantastic. I would absolutely love that, because I don't think we're going to get a sequel with these characters. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same formula that Assassin's Creed has been following for the last sort of 10 years, where they use the DLC expansions to conclude the characters, or they add in different quests after the fact to sort of bulk it out and make these characters go on a full journey. And I do feel like that's potentially what's going to happen with Shadows, but hopefully the execution of these DLCs are a lot more sort of tighter and a bit less messy in terms of their structure, and they can deliver a really good conclusion to these characters. That's what I'm hoping for. I mean, imagine if the Claws of Awaji managed to make Nawe interesting. What if they managed to make her storyline like engaging and really turn the tables on what happens in the main game? That would really be exciting, because we know that Ubisoft Bordeaux are working on that DLC, and they are the guys behind Mirage. Mirage had some really interesting ideas, it just didn't execute them, so hopefully they've gotten a new writer and they can pull that one off. I'd be very excited to see it. We unfortunately haven't really seen the end of this game yet. It's weird. I got to the credits and I was like, oh, that's it. I didn't feel dissatisfied, but I did feel like they'd sort of cut it a bit short, like they were sort of cutting out the ending and leaving it for a DLC, which was a little bit distasteful. I think the length of this game could have really hit a home run if they just added a few more hours with like a really good conclusion with both characters together, and I just didn't feel like we got that. We got two very separate endings and we never really get that collision. We do get an epilogue cutscene with Junjiro, but it's waffle. It's just a quick way of wrapping up. It's basically an end credit scene. It's so quick. Now, like I said, I will be doing more in-depth videos that go further into specific storylines in the game. Like I say, I want to do a whole video talking about Hattori Hanzo because of his execution. I want to talk about Nuno Caro a little bit more, so I'll probably do a video on him. There's a lot planned, and I do want to really go into this story and pick it apart. But for now, that is my unscripted thoughts on the story of Assassin's Creed Shadows. Have you finished the story yet? I mean, I hope so if you're watching this video, because there's a lot of spoilers. But what did you think of the storyline? Which character did you resonate with more, and where do you see the storyline going in the future? I'm really curious to find out, because I've been staying well away from spoilers throughout this entire playthrough. It's only now that I'm gonna start watching these spoiler reviews and these dissections and try and find out what other people think of the game. So do let me know down below. If you did like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Assassin's Creed content, and I will see you next time.